And so at that point, I realized that it's not exactly about having the answers about, how to develop a community. You have to advocate for those answers, right? And so that's really what kind of pushed me to want to understand law more holistically, right?
World. This is Norton Baptista, VP of Debt and Equity at Northmark, and I'm here with another episode of Keys to Success. And today we have our guest, Evan Lewis. And Evan, you can introduce yourself and tell the people what you do.
Yeah, my name is Evan Lewis. Right now, I'm an associate attorney at the law offices of Barry Crimmins. Additionally, I work as an associate attorney at Platinum Partners, LLC, which is more of our land use real estate side of the business. And we primarily facilitate developments, right? So we help developers get their permits. We help purchase and sales agreements, just basically facilitate, real estate generally.
Okay, nice, man. Well, thanks for coming, and appreciate having you here and everything. And just a little background for the audience. I met Evan at a networking event out in the South Shore at the Brockton golf course. Was that Thorny?
Yep.
So, yeah, man, it was a great time. I just got to mention, man, I remember when I met you, you mentioned that you're a land use lawyer, and I know of only one other land use lawyer, Ian Urquhart. Shout out to Ian. Ian, he went to my high school and stuff. He was like ahead of me, but he also coached my older brother in basketball. And it's crazy because I caught up with him and he was like, yeah, I didn't know about this. Like when I was in high school, I had no idea I could be a land use lawyer or any of that stuff. But seems to be a pretty cool career if you're going to be a lawyer,
Yeah. So I wasn't aware of the field initially either. Actually, I started out my career in engineering. So I used to live in Wisconsin, actually. That's where I'm from. And when I was out there, Wisconsin's a really agricultural state, and I was working as an environmental engineer regulating the water pollution in the rivers around there, right? And as I was working for the state agency, we did all the math to determine how much pollution could go into these rivers. But then the attorneys we were working with superseded our calculations because of some political prerogatives in the state to preserve the agricultural industry, right?
Okay.
And so at that point, I realized that it's not exactly about having the answers about, how to develop a community. You have to advocate for those answers, right? And so that's really what kind of pushed me to want to understand law more holistically, right? And so that's when I went to law school, and that's when I discovered land use law as the field that pertained to the issues I was concerned about.
Nice, man. So, all right, so just to back up a little bit, so you mentioned you're from Wisconsin. So you went to high school out there and everything. What sports did you play in high school or, like, growing up? And, like, how does that translate into what you do now?
Yeah, so I played football. I ran track growing up. I was like a stereotypical jock back in the day. And I think it was good for me insofar as it taught me a lot of discipline from an early age, going to two-a-days, getting yelled at by football coaches all the time, and that camaraderie as well among all the rest of your teammates. For instance, when I was playing, I'm actually from the same community that J.J. Watt grew up in.
Nice.
So we had to play football against him, a couple of years in a row, right? And so when you have J.J. Watt coming at you full speed, it's nice to have a band of brothers you can, link up with in order to protect yourself. So it was nice to kind of understand how to create a community at an early age in addition to, being steadfast in achieving your goals.
Cool. So growing up playing sports just taught you how to, one, team build and how to, bond with your team and things like that.
Exactly.
So where did you go to college?
Yeah, so let me actually back up a little bit. So originally I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right? And Milwaukee is like at the western extent of the Rust Belt, right? This area of the country where there's a lot of dilapidated factories from, the 60s and 70s and whatnot. And so I grew up in the aftermath of all of that, and so there were a lot of abandoned factories, warehouses next to a lot of dilapidated neighborhoods with a lot of people of color in them, right? And, I grew up very close to that area, and I saw a lot of poverty and suffering, partially due to the contamination that was over there. So I thought if I could clean this area up, then the area would improve overall, holistically, right? And so that's why I wanted to environmentally engineer the environment, you know what I mean? And so that's why I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison to study that. And yeah, so that was pretty straightforward. I got a basic engineering education and started working at the Department of Natural Resources out there in Wisconsin. And that's where I encountered all those issues with regulating the water pollution.
Cool, man. So in a simple sense, all of your experience as an engineer made you want to become a lawyer, right?
Exactly.
And so it's funny because when you grow up in an immigrant household, those are the things that they teach you to do.
Right.
So it's either doctor, lawyer, engineer, and you're two of those things. so I gotta give you props on that, man, because that's a lot of schooling, that's a lot of knowledge, and that's a lot of applicable knowledge as well. So, how long have you been in Boston now?
Actually, I've been in Boston about 10 years. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I left Wisconsin back in 2013, went to BU Law. I graduated from there in 2016. However, I didn't have enough experience as an engineer in order to sit for the professional engineering exam in order to obtain my professional engineering license. And so I wanted to do that for a few more years. So I actually started working at the Environmental Protection Agency in Boston, doing similar work to what I was doing earlier, regulating water pollution, but obviously in different waters. We have the ocean around here and whatnot. Additionally, I was working on environmental justice issues as well with the Obama and Biden administrations. They put forth an effort to really enforce an executive order concerning environmental justice passed by the Clinton administration back in the 90s. And so I was appointed to spearhead that effort with some other people at the agency, which also led me to a lot of other legal issues, you know what I mean, surrounding environmental enforcement.
Cool. So in your time in Boston or, otherwise through school and everything, is there a mentor that you had, someone who, helped guide you to where you are now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, before this interview, we were speaking about playing at churches and whatnot, and the pastor of that church, Emmett Price III, he's been, a huge guiding hand, and a lot of other people in that church as well. Our deacon Bruce, for instance, he's been instrumental in just checking in on you, especially when things at work and your personal life are getting you down. Those people have been very consistent in my life with providing me support, not only through law school, but, through my engineering career to this very day. I'll see him on Sunday.
Shout out to Deacon Bruce. Can you explain the real estate development process and then your role in that process for the audience?
Yeah. So it really, so much really depends on the site, right? So what do you want to do in the first place, right? Do you just want to buy a house? Well, that's easy enough. We can just prepare a purchase and sale agreement, exchange it with the opposing party's attorney, get some negotiations going. We can get you your property, make that closing happen. However, if you want to, say, develop a project, if you want to break ground on something, do some construction, well, that might be a little more complicated, right? So cities have different tiers of review for different uses is what they call it. So if you've ever played like SimCity or anything in the past like that, you got to draw the roads, and then you got a zone, commercial zone, industrial zone, residential zone. Well, that's how it is in real life, And so you got to figure out, this empty plot of land, what is it? Is it a residential zone? Is it a commercial zone? Is it an industrial zone? And it's a little more complex than your SimCity game, obviously, because they break it down even further, right? For single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, etc. And so you have your use, right? And then you take a look at what the zoning is in that area. Does the use match up with the zoning? If so, you can likely do it as of right is what it's called, right?
Nice.
And that just means you need to get approval from the local planning authority to make sure that your design is in accordance with community sensibilities. However, if your use is not allowed in that particular zone, then you might need what's called a special permit, which means you have to go to either the zoning board of appeals or the planning board in that area, present your project, show how it complies with the local bylaws, and then that permit granting authority will give you the permit. Some issues we bump into from time to time is when someone has a use that's just purely not allowed in a district, and in that case, you might need what's called a use variance. However, use variances aren't always available in every community, and so that's why I say choosing the plot, is probably the most crucial part of this entire process, right? Because everything that comes after that really depends on where you're trying to build, what you're trying to build.
Okay, cool. So can you tell us about a time where maybe you were going through the process and everything, and then you hit a challenge, and you were like, "Oh man, how am I gonna get through this?" And you ended up powering through.
Yeah. So a lot of it actually has to deal with timelines of different state agencies and different municipalities and whatnot, right? And so, for instance, we had to get an answer from a state agency about how their processes are conducted for affordable housing, insofar as we could present that information at a local municipality's town hall, right? And the town hall was coming up, and our client was set to break ground on this project in the near future. However, we didn't hear anything back from the state, within a reasonable time, insofar as we could prepare anything, to present. So I actually had to do a lot more pestering than I honestly felt comfortable with, insofar as trying to chase down the people to get me the answer, right? But it goes back to what I was talking about with football, that discipline, you know what I mean? Just kind of stay steadfast to get that goal of obtaining that answer, insofar as we had the information to present at that meeting. And the information was presented, and they're proceeding with breaking ground on their project.
Nice. So what has been your favorite project to work on so far?
You know what? My favorite project is probably something that we got done with recently. And it was really simple. It was just turning a single-family home into a two-family home, right? And the reason it was my favorite was because it's touched upon those skills that I had accumulated in the past in my environmental work, right? So this house was in the middle of a wetland, right? So a middle of a swampy area, right? And my past as an environmental engineer dealing with water issues, I mean, that's right up my alley, you know what I mean? So I understood everything that was a concern from the town's point of view, and I could really speak their language, when I was talking to the building inspector and other people like the Conservation Commission and people in there who had, concerns about this project. Additionally, since I was on the other side of it and advocating from that side, I could also see what our client wanted to do and how he wanted to, make the area more dense to facilitate, a solution to this housing crisis that we're facing. You know what I mean? So it was really enjoyable for me because I felt like I had an overview of everyone's concerns, and thus I could attack those concerns very efficiently.
Nice.
And we just got approved for that project. I think it was 3-4 weeks ago. And so I'm really excited to see how that progresses and whatnot. I mean, another interesting part about that project too was the community engagement as well, because some people in the suburbs, they don't like seeing the suburbs being developed, and so it was interesting to see how that pushback was so intense at the beginning. However, after working with the neighbors and trying to facilitate their needs, we were able to get to an amicable solution in the end.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. So, are there any big projects that you're working on right now that you're excited about?
Yeah, right now we're actually working on a Jewish retirement home in Stoughton, Massachusetts, and it's an affordable housing project, and it's located on multiple acres in Stoughton. This agency, or not this agency, but this philanthropic organization has lots of ties within the state. They have a lot of other large retirement facilities in the state. And so it's exciting because their facilities are really top notch, you know, and their staff are really great to work with and whatnot. And like I said, they have all those connections within the state, so it makes facilitating these projects a lot easier. So I'm really excited to see that because, you know, honestly, this is probably the biggest project I've worked on up to this date.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I like that question because it's like I get to see, well, it gets to show that, you know, a lot of people when they look at at real estate development or they look at commercial real estate, everybody likes doing big deals. And, you know, it's cool. Don't get me wrong, right? You go big, you get rewarded big. But it's interesting that your favorite deal is a two-family. Like, I wasn't expecting that. But your favorite deal was a two-family because you're like, all right, cool. I get to use all of my expertise on this. Like, it called the full being of you to it, exactly. Right? And so I would have expected you to say this retirement home because it's the biggest one so far, right? But it's interesting how that's the two-family is the most fulfilling one for you, right?
Yeah. I think what motivates me is pursuing intellectual wealth above everything else, right? And so even if a project is more economically advantageous, like I'm happy to do it, right? However, if it's not really piquing my expertise or my desire to inquire, then I'm not going to be interested from an intellectual point of view. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
And so, although I may be happy to get the job, it's not the most exciting job for me. I'm not really learning anything from it. It's just kind of rinse, wash, and repeat.
What would you say is your key to success?
My key to success is what I just mentioned, that intellectual curiosity, you know, because it forces me to have a flexible mind, right? Because you can't learn if you're rigid in your ways or trying to be self-righteous and whatnot, right? And so it forces me to be humble and look in the mirror about my own mistakes, right? And be open to change in the future. Additionally, it keeps me adapting to constantly changing environments and whatnot. And I don't just mean even in the workplace, but I mean even socially. I mean, like, nowadays you can't say a lot of the stuff we were saying on the playground in the 90s, you know what I mean? And so so having a flexible mind is useful for stuff like that, you know what I mean? And yeah, so I think intellectual curiosity and just wanting to find out more about the world is what really drives me, not only in the workplace, but generally speaking.
So is there anything that you feel you would do differently in your experience to help you get to where you are faster?
That's a good question. That is something I've thought about, right? One thing I really would have liked is to network more at an earlier age, right? Because I'm more of an introvert. And so usually after I get done with a big project or something, I just go home, have a good meal, go to bed, you know what I mean? But I've interacted with so many people in my past who honestly could have helped me out as far as giving me knowledge about where I'm going next or about providing me with new opportunities, but I was either too shy to ask them for help or I just never appreciated that they appreciated me in the first place. You know what I mean? I always felt like a burden on them. You know what I mean? And so one thing I would do differently is really take advantage of all my loved ones around me.
So I guess with that would be if you were to give some advice to someone who wanted to follow in your footsteps, it would definitely be to network more, love learning. Anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Just be disciplined and focus on your goals, right? Setbacks, I mean, they don't take you out the game, right? They just put you on the bench for a little bit. You can always hop back in the game later. So yeah, just stay focused on your goals.
Anything else that you want to share with the audience in terms of advice, anything like that?
I'm not really an unsolicited advice kind of guy, so I don't have anything like teaming off the top of my head. Cool. However, I think that soft skills really go a long way. Not only in this field, but in any field you're dealing with, especially in this field when you're dealing with community members and municipality members and things of that nature. I mean, tone is really important. being a nice guy, right? Being responsive, being considerate of others. One thing that's honestly shocked me in this field, and I hate to say this because I feel like I'm putting lawyers on the spot, but lawyers, they tend to think they're at a higher strata of society than some other people. Some of them, not all of them, obviously. And that can lead to some very dismissive behaviors, right? Where I've seen other lawyers kind of leave clients waiting for months at a time, or they won't come into a meeting for 30 minutes or something like that, just because they feel like
Mr. Big Shot.
exactly that's the way they want to feel. But it's important to realize that you're not more important than anyone else just because you have an education. So having that humility and that perspective, I think, is so crucial, especially in this field. A lot of the players you're dealing with are from high places, and you're dealing with lots of money and things of that nature. Really get to your head.
Man. So if somebody wants to contact you to do business or anything like that, what's the best way for them to reach you?
They can email me, Evan, EVAN, at brc-law.com. They can also feel free to call our office. I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I can get that information, and we can do it.
All right, guys, that's it for this interview. Shout out to Cenavision Studios, where we're filming this today, and stay tuned for the next episode. Visit our website to stay up to date on exclusive content. Follow us on LinkedIn, and follow us on IG as well. And if you're in need of commercial real estate financing, then don't hesitate to reach out to me.